6. Life on Earth. This unit deals with biosphere, importance of plants and other organisms, ecosystems, biogeochemical cycle and ecological balance, biodiversity and conservation. Chapter 15. Life on the Earth. By now you might have realized that all units of this book have acquainted you with the three major realms of environment, that is the lithosphere, the atmosphere and the hydrosphere. You know that living organisms of the earth constituting the biosphere interact with other environmental realms. The biosphere includes all the living components of the earth. It consists of all plants and animals, including all the microorganisms that live on the planet Earth and their interactions with the surrounding environment. Most of the organisms exist on the lithosphere and or the hydrosphere as well as in the atmosphere. There are also many organisms that move freely from one realm to the other. The biosphere and its components are very significant elements to the environment. These elements interact with other components of the natural landscape, such as land, water, and soil. They are also influenced by the atmospheric elements such as the temperature, rainfall, moisture, and sunlight. The interaction of biosphere with land, air, and water are important for the growth, development, and evolution of the organism. Ecology. You have been reading about ecological and environmental problems in newspapers and magazines. Have you ever thought what ecology is? The environment, as you know, is made up of abiotic and biotic components. It would be interesting to understand how the diversity of life forms is maintained to bring a kind of balance. This balance is maintained in a particular proportion so that a healthy interaction between the biotic and abiotic components goes on. The interaction of a particular group of organisms with abiotic factors within a particular habitat, resulting in clearly defined energy flows and material cycles on land, water, and air, are called ecological systems. A habitat, in the ecological sense, is the totality of the physical and chemical factors that constitute the general environment. A system consisting of biotic and abiotic components is known as ecosystem. All these components in ecosystems are interrelated and interact with each other. Different types of ecosystems exist with varying ranges of environmental conditions where various plants and animals have species have got adapted through evolution. This phenomenon is known as ecological adaptation. Types of ecosystem. Ecosystems are of the two major types, terrestrial and aquatic. Terrestrial ecosystem can further be classified into biomes. A biome is a plant and animal community that covers a large geographical area. The boundaries of different biomes on land are determined mainly by climate. Therefore, a biome can be defined as the total assemblage of plant and animal species interacting within specific conditions. These include rainfall, temperature, humidity, and soil conditions. Some of the major biomes of the world are forest, grassland, desert, and tundra biomes. Aquatic ecosystems can be classed as marine and freshwater ecosystems. Marine ecosystems include the oceans, estuaries, and coral reefs. Freshwater ecosystem includes lakes, ponds, streams, marshes, and bogs. Structure and function of ecosystems. The structure of an ecosystem involves a description of the available plant and animal species. From a structural point of view, all ecosystem consists of abiotic and biotic factors. Abiotic factors include rainfall, temperature, sunlight, atmospheric humidity, soil conditions, inorganic substances, carbon dioxide, water, nitrogen, calcium, phosphorus, potassium. Biotic factors include the producers, the consumers, and the decomposers. The producers include all the green plants which manufacture their own food through photosynthesis. The primary consumers include herbivorous animals like deer, goats, mice, and all plant eating animals. The carnivores include all the flesh eating animals like snakes, tigers, and lions. Certain carnivores that feed also on carnivores are known as top carnivores like hogs and mongooses. Decomposers are those that feed on dead organisms, and further breaking down of the dead matter by other decomposing agents like bacteria and various microorganisms. The producers are consumed by the primary consumers, whereas the primary consumers are in turn being eaten by secondary consumers. Further, the secondary consumers are consumed by the tertiary consumers. The decomposers feed on the dead at each and every level. They change them into various substances such as nutrients, organic and inorganic salts, essential for soil fertility. Organisms of an ecosystem are linked together through a food chain. For example, a plant eating beetle feeding on a paddy stalk is eaten by a frog, which is in turn eaten by a snake, which is then consumed by a hawk. This sequence of eating and being eaten and the resultant transfer of energy from one level to another is known as food chain. Transfer of energy that occurs during the process of a food chain from one level to another is known as flow of energy. However, food chains are not isolated from one another. For example, a mouse feeding on grain may be eaten by different secondary consumers, and these carnivores may be eaten by other different tertiary consumers. In such situations, each of the carnivores may consume more than one type of prey. As a result, the food chains get interlocked with one another. This interconnecting network of species is known as food web. Generally, two types of food chains are recognized: grazing food chain and detritus food chain. In a grazing food chain, the first level starts with plants as producers and ends with carnivores as consumers at the last level, with the herbivores being at the intermediate level. There is a loss of energy at each level, which may be through respiration, excretion, or decomposition. The levels involved in a food chain range from between 3 to 5, and energy is lost at each level. A detritus food chain is based on autotrophs energy capture initiated by grazing animals and involves the decomposition of breaking down of organic waste and dead matter derived from grazing food chain. Types of biomes. In the earlier paragraphs, you have learned the meaning of the term biome. Let us now try to identify the major biomes of the world. There are 5 major biomes: forest, desert, grassland, aquatic, and altitudinal biomes. Some features of these biomes are given in the table. Biogeochemical cycles. The sun is the basic source of energy on which all life depends. This energy initiates life processes in the biosphere through photosynthesis, the main source of food and energy for green plants. During photosynthesis, carbon dioxide is converted into organic compounds and oxygen. Out of the total solar insolation that reaches the Earth's surface, only a very small fraction is fixed in photosynthesis. More than half is used for plant respiration, and remaining part is temporarily stored or is shifted to other portions of the plant. Life on Earth consists of a great variety of living organisms. These living organisms exist and survive in a diversity of associations. Such survival involves the presence of systemic flows such as flows of energy, water, and nutrients. These flows show variations in different parts of the world, in different seasons of the year, and under varying local circumstances. Studies have shown that for the last 1 billion years, the atmosphere and hydrosphere have been composed of approximately the same balance of chemical components. This balance of chemical elements is maintained by a cyclic passage through the tissues of plants and animals. The cycle starts by absorbing the chemical elements by the organism and is returned to the air, water, and soil through decomposition. These cycles are largely energized by solar insolation. These cyclic movements of chemical elements of the biosphere between the organism and the environment are referred to as biogeochemical cycles. Bio refers to living organisms and geo to rocks, soil, air, and water of the earth. There are 2 types of biogeochemical cycles: the gaseous and the sedimentary cycle. In the gaseous cycle, the main reservoir of nutrients is the atmosphere and the ocean. In the sedimentary cycle, the main reservoir is the soil and the sedimentary and other rocks of the Earth's crust. The water cycle. All living organisms, the atmosphere and the lithosphere, maintain between them is a circulation of water in solid, liquid, or gaseous form, referred to as water or hydrologic cycle. The carbon cycle. Carbon is one of the basic elements of all living organisms. It forms the basic constituent of all organic compounds. The biosphere contains over 500,000 carbon compounds in them. The carbon cycle is mainly the conversion of carbon dioxide. This conversion is initiated by the fixation of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere through photosynthesis. Such conversion results in the production of carbohydrate, glucose, that may be converted to other organic compounds such as sucrose, starch, cellulose, etc. Here, some of the carbohydrates are utilized directly by the plant itself. During this process, more carbon dioxide is generated and is released through its leaves or roots during the day. The remaining carbohydrates are not being utilized by the plant, become part of the plant tissue. Plant tissues are either being eaten by the herbivorous plant animals or get decomposed by the microorganisms. The herbivores convert some of the consumed carbohydrates into carbon dioxide for release into the air through respiration. The microorganisms decompose the remaining carbohydrates after the animal dies. The carbohydrates that are decomposed by the microorganism then get oxidized into carbon dioxide and are returned to the atmosphere. The oxygen cycle. Oxygen is the main byproduct of photosynthesis. It is involved in the oxidation of carbohydrates with the release of energy, carbon dioxide, and water. The cycling of oxygen is a highly complex process. Oxygen occurs in a number of chemical forms and combinations. It combines with nitrogen to form nitrates and with many other minerals and elements to form various oxides, such as the iron oxide, aluminum oxide, and others. Much of oxygen is produced from the decomposition of water molecules by sunlight during photosynthesis and is released in the atmosphere through transpiration and respiration processes of plants. The nitrogen cycle. Nitrogen is a major constituent of the atmosphere, comprising about 78% of the atmospheric gases. It is also an essential constituent of different organic compounds, such as the amino acids, nucleic acids, proteins, vitamins, and pigments. Only a few types of organisms, like certain species of soil bacteria and blue-green algae, are capable of utilizing it directly in its gaseous form. Generally, nitrogen is usable only after it is fixed. 90% of fixed nitrogen is biological. The principal source of free nitrogen is the action of soil microorganisms and associated plant roots on atmospheric nitrogen found in pore spaces of the soil. Nitrogen can be cosmic radiation. In the ocean, some marine animals can fix it. After atmospheric nitrogen has been fixed into an available form, green plants can assimilate it. Herbivorous animals feeding on plants in turn consume some of it. Dead plants and animals' excretion of nitrogenous waste are converted into nitrites by the actions of bacteria present in the soil. Some bacteria can even convert nitrites into nitrates that can be used again by green plants. There are still other types of bacteria capable of converting nitrates into free nitrogen, a process known as denitrification. Other mineral cycles, other than carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, and hydrogen being the principal geochemical components of the biosphere, many other minerals also occur as critical nutrients for plant and animal life. These mineral elements required by living organisms are obtained initially from inorganic sources such as phosphorus, sulfur, calcium, and potassium. They usually occur as salts dissolved in soil, water, or lakes, streams, and seas. Mineral salts come directly from the Earth's crust by weathering, where soluble salts enter the water cycle. Other salts are returned to the Earth's surface through sedimentation, and after weathering, they again enter the cycle. All living organisms fulfill their mineral requirement from mineral solutions in their environments. Other animals receive their mineral needs from the plants and animals they consume. After the death of living organisms, the minerals are returned to the soil and water through decomposition and flow. Ecological balance. Ecological balance is a state of dynamic equilibrium within a community of organisms in a habitat or ecosystem. It can happen when the diversity of the living organism remains relatively stable. Gradual changes do take place, but that happens only through natural succession. It can also be explained as a stable balance in the numbers of each species in an ecosystem. This occurs through competition and cooperation between different organisms where population remains stable. This balance is brought about by the fact that certain species compete with one another determined by the environment in which they grow. This balance is also attained by the fact that some species depend on others for their food and sustenance. Such accounts are encountered in vast grasslands where the herbivorous animals like deer, zebras, buffaloes, etc., are found in plenty. On the other hand, the carnivorous animals that are not usually in large numbers hunt and feed on the herbivores, thereby controlling their populations. In the plants, any disturbance in the native forest, such as clearing the forest or shifting cultivation, usually brings about change in the species distribution. This change is due to competition where the secondary forest species such as grasses, bamboos, or pines overtakes the native species, changing the original forest structure. This is called succession. Ecological balance may be disturbed due to the introduction of new species, natural hazards, or human causes. Human interference has affected the balance of plant communities, leading to disturbances in the ecosystem. Such disturbances bring about numerous secondary successions. Human pressure on the Earth's resources has put a heavy toll on the ecosystem. This has destroyed its originality and has caused adverse effects to the general environment. Ecological imbalances have brought many natural calamities like floods, landslides, diseases, erratic climatic occurrences, etc. There is a very close relationship between the plant and animal communities within the particular habitats. Diversity of life in a particular area can be employed as an indicator of the habitat factor. Proper knowledge and understanding of such factors provide a strong base for protecting and conserving the ecosystems. End of chapter 15.